Well, excited for this conversation is a huge understatement. Board certified OBGYN specialist, certified menopause practitioner, founder of the Pause Life, which provides menopause and educational support, New York Times bestselling author of the book The New Menopause, and the internet's favorite menopause doctor, Dr. Mary Claire Haver, is here with us today. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Haver. We are all so excited for you to be here.
Thank you so much. I love being here.
Are you tired of talking about menopause yet? No.
Um,
You think you're just going to keep talking about it. You won't tire of it.
as long as there's some woman who feels uneducated and left behind, I still have work to do. So
Right.
we have a long way to go. And
Ha-
it's fun. It's my passion. It's my
yeah.
job.
You seem passionate about it, which I love. You're if people aren't following you on Instagram, I love the videos that you do. They're educational but also can be very entertaining. So, we all thank you. How did you find yourself in this menopause space? Did you ever see yourself doing
No,
this?
no. I mean, I was a board certified OB-GYN. I was practicing at a big academic institution. I completely saw myself retiring there in my 60s. And
Right.
and just life circumstances, opportunity, my own menopause, my own frustration with the medical system of, wait a minute, the rage, the actual rage I felt when I realized I don't know enough about menopause
Hmm.
to be clinically effective to help myself or my patients. And it was just this lightning bolt that hit me of, wait a minute, is the last third of my life not as important than when I was able to bear children? Because
Right.
that's where the focus of the study and the money and the influence and the infrastructure around women's health is for our uteruses,
Yeah.
their ability to bear children, which is important. None of us would be here without it. But you know, wait a minute, when you look at the gender health gap, that's where I'm like, and look at the health of my grandmother and my mother and the last 10 years of those women's lives of my aunts, and how it is not a good life, those last 10
Yeah.
years. And these were women who worked hard, who did everything they were told, who followed the rules and, ate what they thought was healthy and have suffered miserably from preventable disease.
Mhm. Talk a little bit about the gender health gap. I had that down to talk about later, but since you brought it up, can you, because I heard you talk about it the other day and had never heard about it. Can you explain what
Yeah.
that is?
So this was data coming out of McKinsey Institute, and they were working with, I believe that came out of research funded by Melinda Gates. And what they found was that women, so if you follow all of the wellness bros, right? Who I
Hmm.
love, okay. I have nothing against
Do
them.
you though? You
I,
love going up against them. You love when they
I,
have something to say.
well, there's kind of a spectrum, right? So
Yes, that's true.
the heavily evidence-based Peter. And then there's a whole nother end of people I'm not even going to mention.
Right.
So, but they all want to live forever. There's this whole male centric, of I'm going to live to 120. I want to live forever. Women do not want to live forever.
Right.
They don't want to live without their loved ones. They have no desire to be alone on an island living to 120.
Yes.
We live longer than men, 4 to 5 years on average. We win the longevity game just from being female. However, we spend 20% of that life in poorer health and
Mhm.
disability and decline and decay than our male counterparts. Women come to me and they want to live healthier for as long as possible.
Right.
But they're not going to extend their lives. They don't want to extend their lives when they're going to end up in a nursing home or in a bed or losing their independence, right? Or having
Yeah.
to rely on their family or children because they can't wipe their own heinies or make their own food, or
Mhm.
they've lost the ability to think or to move to the point where
Yeah.
they take care of themselves. So that is the gender health gap, that yes, we're living longer, but we are living in much poorer health. And there's a
Okay.
lot of reasons why this is happening. One, menopause is totally unaddressed. Okay. And the multi-organ system effects of the loss of our sex hormones on our bodies. Number two is that we haven't prioritized women's health outside of reproduction. Women were excluded from studies until 1993. So the
Mm.
statin studies and studies on chronic disease, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, very few of those were done in women. And turns out we disease differently than our
Mm.
counterparts. So it's not just menopause and stopping a hot flash, which is important. This is a much bigger bigger conversation around protecting our health, our health span as we age.
Yeah. Well, and you were just, and I want to ask you about it on the Oprah special, which I am sure most people saw. If you haven't, it's amazing. I watched it last week, called The Menopause Revolution. And one of the other guests was Halle Berry. And I loved that at the beginning of the episode, when referring to the time we enter menopause, she said, it's a privilege to age and we should feel like the crowned jewels of our society. And I just would love this episode to kind of give women the tools to feel that way, because I think, to your point, it's like, if you have had children, it kind of feels like you've had children, you've done your job. Thanks for coming out. Off to pasture you go. And also on that special, I think it was Naomi Watts said something about how menopause in the past has signaled, like, to the rocking chair, get your knitting needles. Your sex life is done. You're just going to get old, and we don't really have much use for you anymore. So I just would love this to help women feel empowered going forward. How did you tell us about how you ended up on Oprah? Because that's a big
Uh,
deal.
Phone call.
A phone
So
call.
producer called our director of communications. She kind of fields all the opportunities that come our way.
Hmm.
I had been doing work for Oprah daily,
Okay.
writing articles and just providing, they'll call and say, hey, we want to do an article on blah, blah, blah. Would you co-write the article, provide quotes, whatever. Of course, I had a New York Times bestseller, and Oprah and Gail are very, very close. And Gail had interviewed me during Pub Week for the book.
Mhm.
And when I tell you, I've been on multiple national news shows, right? Morning shows. Gail was the most prepared of every host I had.
Wow.
She walked in with the book highlighted, underlined with sticky tabs.
Wow.
She had a full page of handwritten questions. She
Wow.
sat down with me in the green room before, and we went over everything. And I thought, that was my first big morning talk show. So I just thought that was the norm. I don't know. And
Right.
little did I know that is not.
It's not
So
the norm.
I knew that Gail loved the book, and she tends to kind of, when she loves something, she'll give it to Oprah. So I don't know exactly. I wasn't privy to that conversation, but I'm assuming something Gail had done. We were a New York Times bestseller for several weeks, right? For 28 weeks, maybe.
Yeah.
And their producer called us, and we fell on the floor.
I
Like,
bet. Yes. Did you?
knew the Oprah effect
Right.
would be tremendous for us, for our visibility, for the whole menopause revolution, right?
Yeah.
And I'm so proud to represent, the medical establishment in that. There was a neurologist there in the audience who was amazing and talked
Yeah.
about Alzheimer's research and cognitive research in menopause. And then, but I really was the expert. And
Hmm.
as far as just general OBGYN and menopause care. And it was really a privilege and something I
Yeah.
did not take very lightly. And I knew that this was a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I wasn't going to mess it up.
What would the 30-year-old doctor you have thought if you had told her one day you were gonna be on Oprah as a menopause expert?
So funny you asked, because 20 years ago, almost to the day, a hurricane took out our little town here in Galveston. We had Hurricane Katrina had hit New Orleans, right? And then the next, I think 2 years later, we had Hurricane Ike that wiped out 25% of our island, and, massive disruption. And, like, the island was shut down for weeks. So I was part of the recovery effort. And when they brought over the evacuees from Katrina to New Orleans, to Houston, I was part of that relief, right? And so I got invited to go on the Oprah show because of my volunteer efforts 20 years ago. And
Oh,
so
wow.
and it ended up being her favorite things show. And like,
Oh,
my story was highlighted, and I got to go up on stage and meet her and take pictures with her. So I had this picture with Oprah from our favorite things for 20 years. And I always thought, what would it take for me to get back on this stage? Like in what world would I ever be back up here? And it was kind of a what full circle moment when I
right.
got on that stage, and
Wow, that's
she has
amazing.
no recollection of this,
Right, yeah.
It
She's
was
like,
a
"Yes, I remember, I remember."
it was, oh
Wow,
god.
that's amazing. That's a great story. Okay, so I was going to ask you this later. And then when I was kind of going through my order, I thought, I want to ask this right off the bat because I believe that there is going to still be a decent amount of women who will listen to this podcast, but will still listen to it with a question mark until this question is addressed because they have heard it, they have it in the back of their head. But I would love you to address, well, what everyone calls the WHI, the Women's Health Initiative study, which was the study that came out a decent amount of time ago
2000,
that 2000, 2000,
2000.
2002, that suggested that estrogen therapy would cause women to get breast cancer and what halted HRT kind of like across the world. So, can you talk a little bit about that study,
Yeah,
your
sure.
thoughts, all of those things?
So I was the chief resident when that was released. It was, we had rumblings of it in like June, and then in July, I believe, was whenever. And I was sitting in M&M conference, morbidity and mortality conference, and I could hear my professors, whispering about it in the background. I was trying to focus on the case being presented, and they kept hearing menopause and estrogen, breast cancer, and I was like, "What?" We had been taught to prescribe hormone therapy for menopause, and there was a big push because of the observational evidence. We knew that women who were on HRT, when we typically start HRT at about age 50, 51, when women start having severe symptoms, that those women tend to have less heart attacks and are healthier and don't break their bones as much and do better, right? So we knew all that. And so the WHI was, okay, is this cardiovascular protection because women who take HRT tend to be healthier and wealthier and have better resources? Or is it an artifact effect? Because observational studies doesn't prove causation. It just they prove correlation, right?
Right.
So to prove causation, we need randomized control studies, right? And blinded, placebo controlled. So here we go. We're finally going to study women's health outside of reproduction. And it's a huge study. They got I think it was $1 billion, right? And this was like 23 years ago. Well, they started collecting data like in the late 90s. So this was huge. This was a first female director of the National Institutes of Health. This was her big initiative. The outcome they were trying to measure was heart disease. If you take HRT, are you less likely to have a heart attack? That was the outcome. So in order to find that outcome and not have the study be a $5 billion study, the average age of the patients was 63, because they had to, if we started them at 50, we'd have to track them for 20 something years, 30
Mhm.
years to see if they had heart attacks. If you start them older, to see if it's protective. Okay. So remember, we're starting much earlier, much later rather than anyone would ever start hormone therapy. Okay. They recruit tens of thousands of women. They have two arms, estrogen only, and then an estrogen and progesterone arm. And each of those had a placebo. So there's basically 4 studies going on at once. Okay.
Okay.
Placebo, two studies, placebo controlled. If you have a uterus, you must have a progestin. Okay. If you don't have a uterus, estrogen only is an option. So that was our 2 groups, an estrogen only arm, an estrogen and progestin arm. They used Premarin and Prempro, which wasn't unreasonable at the time. Those were the 2 top prescribed HRT formulations in the world. So, or at least in Western countries. So, okay, let's use that. And of course they happily donated the medicine, right? So,
Yeah.
so the patient, when you do a randomized control study, the patients don't pay for their medication. So they start collecting data and they notice that there seems to be in the estrogen and progestin arm a higher incidence of breast cancer. And they were not seeing a cardiovascular benefit in that arm, in that arm. And so, and they saw increased risk of stroke. And so the breast cancer arm never met statistical significance. And in
Why
science,
did it get such a thing then?
because they called a press conference
Oh,
and got all the big in. So they pulled, so this is a multi-center trial. They built to 3 head researchers decided to do this on their own. They quickly showed the article to everybody else, pulled them all in the room, said, you have 1 hour to make changes. They didn't incorporate any changes. There were massive protests of all the researchers, some of the other researchers. And this was a almost unilateral decision of 3 dudes who just
wow.
decided estrogen causes breast cancer when it never met statistical significance ever. And it ended up going viral before
Crazy. Yes.
the internet, right? It was the #1 medical news story of 2002. It was on the cover of every major newspaper,
Yeah.
magazine. Our clinics were going crazy. Women were throwing their stuff in the trash. And once you get that genie out of the bottle, she's been almost impossible to put back in. That fear, when you look at social media and the way things gonna catch on today, fear sells.
Yeah.
Fear sells magazines. Fear sells clicks. Fear sells engagement, not reassurances. Now this is actually okay. Autism, vaccines don't really cause autism.
Right.
You're going to see what gets the most clicks. So the whole psychology, this was like a good study in how things go viral, right? And I was terrified.
You were? I was going to ask you that. Like you bought into it?
None
Okay.
of us were able to read the study before all
Oh,
the conjecture. And remember, a lot of the research is siloed, right? Behind these big ivory institutions, common people could not read research articles back then. They had no access.
right.
So now, not like now with the internet, where you can go and Google and pull it up and pay $39 and get the article and make, and if you know how to read a science article. And so everyone freaked out, all of the medical specialties, everything halted. Any meaningful research in women's health after reproduction stopped abruptly.
It was that powerful.
Yeah. Now, over the ensuing decades, multiple of those claims have been walked back, almost all of them.
Really?
Yeah. And the estrogen only arm, they had a 30% decrease in the rate of breast cancer. For the women on estrogen and progestin, they had a lower stage and higher survivability than the women who were on placebo. So there were no increased risk of death from breast cancer. The number one, I fear breast cancer, as we all should.
Yeah.
I'm more likely to have osteoporosis and a fracture and die from that than to die from breast cancer.
Did they ever rescind what they said?
20 times more likely to die of a heart attack.
Yeah.
And so, but no one cares about that. And so this hysteria around women's breasts and breast cancer, women don't really die that often from breast cancer. And I don't mean to offend anyone who's lost a family member who is dealing with breast cancer. It's real. But when we look at population health and how just emotions took charge of this, and women were left bereft without their menopause being addressed or the long-term consequences. And so now we know that women, so what about heart disease? Well, there were some younger patients started. So it turns out there's a window of opportunity for cardiovascular prevention. And it's within the first 10 years of your menopause. Estrogen is better at prevention than cure. The end.
Okay.
So it's better at protecting the endothelial cells that line those coronary arteries to keep them from forming plaques. Once the plaque forms, it's not that helpful. So that's kind of where we are. And for the vast majority of women who are in their menopause journey, the benefits are going to outweigh the risk for them.
Why do you think it has taken society so long to accept menopause as do you refer to it as a medical condition, or what would you,
it is a natural phase of life, but it doesn't mean it's not pathologic. So we have a trajectory change for our health span at menopause. And so that's what I call it. Yes, it's natural, and you don't have to have hormone therapy to be healthy. You can be healthy without it, but it's harder.
Yeah. I asked people if they wanted to submit questions, and that was a lot of people's, if you have
what if you're one of the 15%? Well, what do you mean have no symptoms? Women don't realize the symptoms.
So I guess in their mind, hot flashes or the typical, right? Because when I entered menopause, I thought I was just going to stop getting a period and have a hot flash, and that's how I would know. I'd never even heard of perimenopause before I entered menopause. But so yeah, they were basically saying, if I don't have any symptoms, is it still beneficial for me to take HRT? Protect your bones. Well, and you said, I don't think it was on the Oprah. I think I heard you say it somewhere else, but when you were talking about the Women's Health Initiative, you said that it has caused an epidemic of dementia and osteoporosis, and that in fact, HRT can help with Alzheimer's and osteoporosis in the future.
So in patients who have the ApoE4 gene, so if you're high risk because you carry that genetic marker.
For Alzheimer's, is that for Alzheimer's?
And you start within the first 5 years of your menopause, you will have a decreased risk of developing full Alzheimer's with age. And then even your brain volume will be higher and your cognitive scores will be higher versus women not given that therapy. So for women at high risk, we don't have enough evidence to say yet, that, remember, because cognitive brain fog or, the temporary cognitive disturbances due to perimenopause do get better with HRT. But where the research is happening right now is how effective is early HRT going to be for the woman of average risk for Alzheimer's and her future production, right? We have 13, 14 things that feed into Alzheimer's, everything from nutrition, exercise, stress, cortisol, diet, you know. So it's hard to kind of put everything in a vacuum and be like, you know, this
Yeah.
woman wasn't sleep is one of the biggest things. If you're not sleeping,
Yeah.
you're way more likely, you know, and having a good solid 8 hours on most nights. I mean, we all have the occasional whatever, but if you're not having good solid sleep, you're at increased risk of Alzheimer's. So, you know, we don't have enough evidence to clearly say that HRT is going to be absolutely protective of, you know, dementia, Alzheimer's dementia. Not, you know, vascular dementia is something different, but most women, it's Alzheimer's. And, but the evidence is sure looking like it.
Okay.
So, especially when you
Is
start early.
is it okay? So the other two-part question. Number one with HRT, and I'm going to ask you about HRT in a second, but for hormone therapy, another big question was, is it too late for me? I'm 65, I'm 70, I've never done
So,
HRT.
you
I'm
know,
through
even the
menopause.
most stalwart menopause society members who are absolutely by the book are like, look, if you're over 65 and you're having severe hot flashes, why not? And the
Okay.
benefits outweigh the risk for you, why not? Now, it gets very nuanced. Remember, estrogen is better at prevention than cure. You know, the cardiologists get nervous if you already have calcium deposits, right, in the heart
Mm,
above a certain level. Is estrogen going to be safe? Okay. And there's a
okay.
lot of debate over that right now. So we're getting cardiac workups on our over, you know, new start over 65. It's a different story when you've been on it and you're doing great and you love
Yeah.
it. Everything, your bones are great and your brain is great and you're living your best life. And can I just keep going on this?
Hmm.
You know, and you're eating right, and you're sleeping, you're doing all the things. And so versus a new start at 65.
So if you're 65 or over, you definitely want some sort of cardiac workup before.
That's
Okay.
how we are in our clinic. Yeah.
Okay. And so for me, I started, I guess, at
You know, she
49.
has risk factors in her 50s. If she's
Oh,
hypertensive,
really? Okay.
diabetic, obese, you know, smoker, she has multiple risk factors for cardiac disease. There's nothing magical about 60. You're just more likely because of aging to develop heart disease, right?
Okay. And if someone starts, like for myself at 49, am I looking at a window I want to try to be off of it by, or
No,
can I just go till I die? Just keep
you
on
could,
it.
as long
I
as
could.
for you, the benefits outweigh the risks and you want to
Okay.
keep going.
Okay. Okay. All right. Let's talk about perimenopause because I don't know if it's a new thing or I just never heard of it or it's
I
just gotten a lot
learned
of
the
attention.
definition in
Okay.
residency, and that was it. As long as it took
Really?
say it was as much as I learned about it. Yeah.
So is perimenopause literally just the time leading up to menopause?
So it's more complicated than that. I mean, if you, because here's what happens. If you look at a healthy woman who has a regular menstrual cycle, so she is premenopausal, her cycles come in every 28 days, every 38 days, whatever. She's got this EKG like predictable ebb and flow of her sex hormones, right? Of FSH and LH with each month. We have the surge mid cycle with ovulation, then progesterone comes up in the second half. And then we repeat that month after month after month. Well, females are born with all of their eggs, right? We have 1 to 2 million at birth. By the time we're 30, we're down to 10%. And
30?
Mhm.
Wow.
By the time you're 40, you're down to roughly 3% of your original egg supply. So why do we ovulate? Ovulation starts in the brain. Okay, so there's a gland in the brain called the hypothalamus. Let's see,
Hmm.
some endocrinology here. So the hypothalamus has a little needle, just pretend, you know, in the blood that is looking for estrogen. And when estrogen naturally goes low after ovulation, the brain's like, huh, I want my estrogen back. So it sends a signal to the pituitary, which sits right under the hypothalamus saying, hey, tell the ovary to go ahead and start making estrogen again. So the ovary's like, all right, boss. I mean, the pituitary. So the pituitary puts out hormones called LH and FSH. Okay. That then talk to the ovary. They bind to little receptors around the egg called the follicular cells and the granulosa cells. And those cells respond by starting to produce estrogen. And then after ovulation, progesterone. Okay. A very simplified, whatever. We reach a critical egg threshold level in perimenopause where the signals coming from the brain no longer work. The ovary becomes resistant.
Mm.
So the hypothalamus is freaking. Where is my estrogen? I was expecting it. It is not here. It gets mad at the pituitary. Pituitary says, boss, I sent the signal. It says, send more. So we get these much higher levels of FSH pulsations. Then the ovaries like, and like vomits out, and
Nothing.
like under duress. And so
Right.
we get these surges of estrogen higher than we typically ever had. Before the ovulations are delayed, we start seeing timing disruptions. So instead of this like monthly ebb and flow, like an EKG, it now looks like I took spaghetti and threw it at the wall. And
Right.
so you've lost all predictability. That is perimenopause. When you reach that critical egg threshold where the normal pulsatile signals coming from the brain stop working as well, and the brain has to work a lot harder. And what we see as the primary initial symptoms, typically in perimenopause, is not cycle disruption. It is brain fog and mental health
Brain
change.
fog. Okay. Yes. When you called it
No
somewhere, I
one
saw that
taught me this.
in medical school. No
No,
one
or
taught you that.
residency, or even from the Menopause Society.
Yeah.
This was Mary Claire reading article after article after article, talking to doctor after doctor after doctor, and like talking to 100,000 patients in my career, and being like, okay, what if we just believe her?
Yeah.
What if we don't dismiss this all as just something she's going through, or women tend to get stressed out? No one said to me, Mary Claire, why are these women getting stressed out? Why are they no longer able to handle the usual shit going on in their lives? Why is this happening? It's our hormone.
Yeah. Well, you called it, I saw the zone of chaos. And I thought so many women will feel vindicated just hearing you say that because, like, even what you were talking about, the up and down, I was like, yes, from like the mental to the sore shoulder to the not sleeping, you just feel like you don't even know what your day is going to
Not
entail.
feeling like myself.
Yes.
Not
Yes.
feeling like myself.
Someone
Like
said to me
Chris
once
has
they
stopped following the rules.
yeah, they said they felt like that they were the generic version of themselves. And I thought, that was to me, it was such an accurate description of how, because I was, will say to people, for me, it was definitely the mental and just feeling like everything is fine. My kids are fine. My marriage is fine. uh, Everything is
Oh,
fine.
but is it really? But what I was
Why
trying
do
to
I
say to you, are
feel
you sure? Did you
right?
really weigh your food? Did you really park that far from the garage, to get your extra steps
Right.
in?
Yeah.
Did you really do your meditation and journaling? I mean, I have women who were coming to me, they were at the top of their game. These were my friends,
Yeah.
you know?
Right.
I'm going through all this with my girlfriends, and I was like lost. I was
Yeah.
like, can't work. I'm going to get a divorce. I'm going to, I can't operate. I don't know what the hell's going on. Yeah, it's real.
So when you were in perimenopause, did you not fully understand what was happening?
Yeah.
No.
No, and mine was kind of abrupt because I was on birth control pills. So I was kind of masking a lot of it, right?
Mhm.
I got off abruptly when my brother died. I forgot. And then I went like months and months without a period, and was like, oh shit, what's going on?
Right.
Gaslit myself because I was grieving. He died. And so I was grieving, and I kept attributing everything to the grieving, grieving, grieving. And certainly that was part of it. But then when the grief fog started to lift, and I was still just swimming and just treading water and not ever getting to the top,
Yeah.
ever to ever get able to get out of the pool. And I was like, this is not okay. There's
Yeah.
something wrong with me.
And I
And
think like what you just said was how I felt. I thought something is wrong with me because my life is great. I should be happy. Why am I so meh about everything? That was how I felt. My husband was always saying to me, "What's wrong? Are you okay?" And I was like, "Oh my God, stop asking me what's wrong."
kept asking me
And
what's wrong.
stop asking me what's wrong. And my girlfriend, who is a nurse, I
Stop
was
breathing.
telling, yeah, I told her one day, I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, I should be happy to be here where I am right now. And I'm just meh about everything. And she said, have you had your testosterone checked? I didn't, this is how ignorant I was. I didn't know women had testosterone. I thought it
And
was just a male
yeah,
thing.
right. Yeah,
And I
we have
was like, no, why would I? And she said, I bet if you went to your primary care, they would put you on an antidepressant. And she said, I don't think you're depressed. And I found this lady. Now, okay, I'm going to just ask you about this, but I feel like you're going to give me a hard time because I feel like I've asked you about this before. But I have a pellet.
if that's all you were offered, then what else are you gonna do?
No, well,
No?
no, I was offered the cream and I took a break from the pellet and tried the cream. But I also think once you do the pellet first, it's hard to go to the cream. I don't
Just
know.
make sure.
I know you don't love a
No,
pellet.
there's two things about pellets that, I think for my patients, I can do better for them.
Okay.
Number one, I don't tie them to something for 3 months, and I give them a really steady state. The problem with pellets is they're compounded. So we have no like facility going in doing checking. There's no published decay curves on how they actually get out of your system, right?
Mm.
And they've never made the pellets in female physiologic doses. So 100% of patients on pellets will run in the low male level, especially right after they get inserted. Unless it's, I'm talking about BioT specifically.
Yeah.
There's other compounding pharmacies that are doing lower doses. So, and I have some friends in Houston who are doing that. So yeah, it's convenient that you only have to do it every 3 months, but it can be very, very expensive. So we use either T-stem or androgel, which are FDA approved for men. So we borrow the men's version in our clinic, and we check levels to see how she's absorbing but for about $50 for 6 months, I can get her high quality, efficacious, safe hormone therapy, transdermal
So
hormone.
you like the gel or the
Uh,
cream?
yeah,
Okay. Okay. Some of the symptoms I
without
want to,
having to inject her and
right.
subject her to these kind of crazy levels. Yeah.
Slice her butt cheeks open. Yes, I know. I keep saying I'm going to go off it, but you know what I think it is? I think that for so long leading up to it, I felt so terrible.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
now I feel
I get it.
so amazing.
I get
It
it. If
is
that's all
terrifying to
you
think
were
to go back.
offered and that's the only thing your clinician was trained to do,
Yeah.
what else are you going to do? Right.
Right. Yeah.
So
Okay.
I
Um,
need to resort to that for my patients.
okay.
I have alternatives.
Okay.
Much more affordable.
Okay, well, so here's one thing. My insurance actually covers 80%. I have to pay for it. I take it and then and we don't have great insurance because my husband is self-employed. So we do not
Amazing.
have great health insurance.
Pretty rare. That's pretty,
I send it in and they cover 80% of it.
that's amazing.
Now, here's something crazy. When I first called about it, the woman didn't really understand what it was. She asked me what the code was on the sheet. And then she said to me, "Oh, are you transitioning?" And I'm like, "What? No,
Yeah,
I'm
that
just
we
getting
hear
a
that a
pellet."
lot. Like
And she told me that it would have been 100% covered.
if you were transitioning. Yeah.
Yes, but
Yeah.
no, I'm only in menopause, 80%. Okay, so some of the symptoms of perimenopause that some women might be getting and attributing to something else. I have brain fog, dry eyes, frozen shoulder, hair loss, hot flashes, insomnia. Are there other big ones that they might be missing?
So elevated cholesterol, elevated insulin resistance. So A1C going up. You haven't changed anything in your diet. Your cholesterol going up. You haven't changed anything in your diet. Vitamin D levels are really hard to maintain in beginning in perimenopause
Okay,
throughout our lives, but that we kind of see a ramp up there. 80% of menopausal women will have a vitamin D deficiency, 70 to 80%. So,
okay.
I'm writing the new perimenopause right now. So we were
Oh,
just
you are?
libido.
Yes, libido. Weight gain?
GSM, genital urinary syndrome of menopause. So we have a chapter
Okay,
on brain on perimenopause, your uterus, your bones and muscles. So, muscle
mhm.
loss and belly fat gain, visceral fat gain.
Okay, that's what overall weight gain or just belly fat mostly?
So when you plot age and menopause status, we see weight as kind of a steady state increase over time,
Okay.
not having anything to do with menopause. However, body composition changes. So where you're gaining fat
Mm,
is the intra-abdominal cavity, and we're losing muscle. So we
okay.
tend to lose muscle in a more steady state. Those satellite cells do have estrogen receptors, and it's just harder to build without
Yeah.
estrogen on board. So we see muscle loss and then belly fat gain, and more fat gain than muscle loss. So weight's going up.
Okay. You talk about insulin resistance. I don't know if it's the same theory, but what are your thoughts on GLP-1s for
Oh,
weight
I'm a
loss? You
probably
are.
30% of our patients end up in our clinic on a GLP-1. You
Okay.
could absolutely especially the ones who've struggled their whole lives,
With weight.
and who've had pre-diabetes, insulin resistance, abdominal obesity. They do beautifully. And when I tell you, not just how they feel, but like their risk factors for chronic disease drop dramatically.
Because of the
All the
inflammation?
inflammation markers go down, their liver functions go down. Like a lot of them have fatty liver, that gets resolved. A lot of them have insulin resistance. We see dramatic improvements in that. It just
Okay.
incredible. And they feel amazing. They are taking on new work projects. They are getting out of marriages that weren't serving them. They are, reconnecting with a husband who they were kind of,
Yeah.
like they are just all in for their lives all over all of a sudden. Kind of like when you put
Is
someone on HRT. You know,
right. Is there a benefit to someone who doesn't want to lose weight to take, and when we say GLP-1s, we're talking about like Ozempic, tirzepatide, that kind of stuff.
yeah,
Is
tirzepatide
there a
or gluten.
benefit for someone to, you hear about this like microdosing, which is really just taking a smaller amount, right? Is there a
Right.
benefit if you don't want to lose like weight?
So it's a slippery slope, remember,
Mhm.
because our body through menopause and aging is trying to shed muscle. It is like, you
Right.
know, and so with the appetite suppression, it's a fine line. So say we have a patient who gets to whatever weight we were shooting for. We do body composition. We don't do weight in our clinic. And so we get to the visceral fat level that is healthy, and we've eliminated that risk of chronic disease for her, right? Do we stop completely, or do we, a risk of rebounding,
Mhm.
or at what level? So we have to help her figure out the level at which she's not going to lose muscle. And so that she can eat enough protein and stay motivated to go to the gym and do the lifting and to keep her bones and muscles strong with age. Because,
Okay.
there's one thing to lose weight. I don't recommend GLP-1 to lose weight. I don't recommend anyone lose
You
weight.
don't.
Trying to lose. What are you trying to lose?
Right.
If I
Okay.
chopped off your arm, you would lose probably 8, 9, 10 pounds. If but like we are trying to lose visceral fat so that we can lower your risk of chronic disease. When they come in my clinic talking about being in a bikini, we tell them to go. Like that is
Okay.
not a bikini is not going to keep you healthy and keep you out of the nursing home. Like we are totally focused on your next 30 years.
Yeah. Well, and I've heard you talk about it too, and I feel like the same from my kind of teenagers growing up that we never talked about protein, we never talked about muscles, we only talked about
Skinny,
calories and cardio.
skinny.
Being skinny. Yeah. It
Yeah.
was not attractive to have muscles, and it's like now we're trying to, every time I go to like a strength training class or Pilates and I see these like 20-year-old girls in there, I'm like, yes, like
Yes.
I'm so glad that you're not bean poles, that you have like these curves and these beautiful muscles, and
I'm
I
like,
hope the
every
generation is
workout I
happening.
complete, I'm like, one less day in the nursing home.
Yeah. I just ordered a weighted vest. I'm jumping on board with it. Although the box is extra, I haven't taken it out of the box. It's very, I took it the box and I was like, God, what did I order? And then I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the weighted vest.
It's a
What,
hack, right? It's so the reason
why
why
do
I
you love it?
the weighted vest was
Yeah.
I was, seeing in my patient practice, we were checking bone densities on everybody, right? Perimenopause, menopause, whatever, not waiting till 65. They were going to pay out of pocket, or we were figuring out a way to get it covered. And I was just seeing more and more and more bone density issues in most patients, right? And, a woman has a 50% chance of having an one in two, me or you are going to have an osteoporotic fracture. Okay. And if we break our hip, we're dead. So like your chance of death is 30% in 1 year with surgery. Without surgery, it's 79% after age 65. So I'm like, okay, what do we know about if you can't take HRT? Like, what if you have osteoporosis? What can you do? So I'm Googling, going down rabbit holes, looking in all the medical journals, and I find 3, 4, 5 articles looking at balance training, vibratory training, weight vest training, and on weighted vest. And they were in nursing homes. So these were facilities, right? Long-term facilities. And they got these women weighted vests, 10% of their body weight. Now think about who's in a nursing home. Nobody who's obese, right? They already died. The,
Okay.
the last man standing,
That's a valid point. I'd never actually thought
skinny
about that.
lady,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, who avoided heart disease and didn't get cancer, and now she has dementia or frailty. And
Yeah.
so,
Congratulations. Yeah. Wow.
yeah, so she ran the gauntlet of all the other diseases, and now she's demented and or frail. So they put these frail ladies in the weighted vest, and they got better. Their osteoporosis improved. And I'm like,
Wow.
oh shit, I'm not waiting until I'm frail. I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, I'm gonna crack it out of the box today. Will you talk about the is it the DEXA scan? Is that right? Because I heard you talk about it and I've never heard of this in my life.
So the DEXA scan. So the DEXA scan is the gold standard for bone density almetry, bone density measurements.
And what age are we supposed to be getting this at?
So right now, insurance does not cover it until 65 without risk factors. So risk factors would be smokers, um, you're very thin, so very low
Mhm.
BMI, certain metabolic conditions that lead to bone loss. But And so, but some insurance companies will pay at menopause. Menopause is a risk factor. So,
Okay.
but I'm just for $99 in the Houston area,
Is
women
that how much they are?
and get just go pay out of pocket. There's these little standalone centers. And I went to a couple in Houston to go check them out. It's the exact same machine they use in the hospital. So I'm like, okay, we're good.
So
You
it
like,
tells you if you're at risk for osteoporosis or if you already have it.
it tells you your exact bone density and then plots it out
Okay.
where osteopenia and osteoporosis would map
And
out.
then what do you do? What if you're like, oh, you're in
Yeah.
a terrible condition?
So that happens quite a bit. So I have this whole like osteoporosis, prevention protocol. So certainly the
Okay.
most effective pharmacologic agent is menopause hormone therapy for prevention. It's FDA approved for prevention. So if you're osteopenic, for sure you want to consider HRT. But what if you have an absolute contraindication or you don't want to take it? What can you do? Protein intake, creatine, keep those muscles strong,
Yeah.
bone resistance training that's going to stimulate the bone. So box jumping, heavy weight lifting, resistance training where you're trying to get stronger each time, not the same 8-pound weights every time,
So
like,
even protein and creatine are for osteoporosis?
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So
I didn't know
there's
that.
good studies looking at frailty scores and
Hmm.
tied to protein intake, and women with the highest tertile of protein intake had the lowest frailty scores.
Wow. Well, I started taking creatine after you started talking. I feel like I just base my life around what you tell me to do, but except the pellet. But I started taking creatine and noticed just such a difference in my muscle composition. Like all of a sudden, I was like, I knew they were under there somewhere, like just kind of all of a sudden, but not too big because, everyone I think is worried. Is it beneficial to take creatine if you don't work out, if you're not doing any form of exercise?
Great question. There are tons of studies done looking at muscle recovery and muscle protein synthesis and creatine, but new studies, I think Atia just posted one, looking at creatine stores are everywhere, looking at
Hmm.
function, cognitive function, so potentially, yes, that there's other benefits of having, and it's kind of creatine's like testosterone in women. When we're younger, we have tons, right? And then as we age, it goes down, our ability to store it goes down. And so all we're trying to do in older age is replace our stores of stuff or eat 17 chicken breasts, to
Okay.
get that much creatine through food. So, and
Okay.
it's super safe, super tolerable, super cheap. It's like $17 a month for most brands.
Okay. Okay. All right. Let's skip right ahead to sex because you mentioned it and was one of the symptoms of perimenopause or I should say lack thereof. Um, can you just explain a little bit? And one question I actually was wondering, is there a difference between mentally not being sexually attracted to your husband and physically and then maybe you are attracted to him but physically you can't, whether it's painful. Like I've heard women say,
Oh
I
yeah, yeah.
really want
So
to be with my husband, but I don't know, like
sure.
physically, I'm just not there. Are they two
Okay.
different things?
When we look at female sexual function, there's 5 buckets, right, that we have to talk about. So first is relationship. Is there a relationship disorder? No medication is going to make you like him.
Okay, that's first. Right. Do you like him? Yes.
You like him. And she's like, no, I hate him. I'm like, well, here we go. So there's that. A lot of people stay in relationships for reasons other than, financial or,
Yeah.
so relationship disorder. Do you feel connected? Do you feel supported? Do you feel like this is your life partner and someone you want to share intimacy with? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, okay. All right. So no, I love him. Like, I love him. I'm like, okay. Then we have orgasmic disorder.
What's that?
So can't have an orgasm,
Oh, can't have an orgasm. Okay.
right? Now we have delayed orgasm, we have anorgasm, we have primary anorgasmia, secondary anorgasmia. 10% of women will never have an orgasm in their life.
So that I was going to ask you, do you mean like they've never had an orgasm or
Never,
just now they can't?
never.
Oh, never. Okay.
They don't talk about it. No one cares.
Is it a real
Can you imagine
condition?
men went
No.
through
No. No, I can't.
what
I just
the
can't.
world? It would be like a Nobel Prize for the
Yeah.
whoever figured that out, but it happens to 10% of women, and we're all just like, her vagina works.
So are you saying though it's an actual physical thing that prevents them from having it? It's
Well,
not just
there's
they can't.
multiple reasons you can have
Okay.
intercourse.
Okay.
So are you able to orgasm is what I asked the
Okay.
question. Yes, it's a little harder, yeah, sometimes, but I can do it if I put my mind to it. Okay. Then we have arousal disorder. So arousal disorder is basically what happens to men when we say, well, that's what Viagra is for. Arousal disorder is the things that go into the blood flow and the tissues becoming erect and mucus production for women's vaginas, all of that like preparation,
Right.
doesn't happen. Her brain is there. She wants to do it, but like nothing. So that's a blood
Yeah.
flow or nerve conduction disorder. Okay. And vaginal Viagra can help with that for some women. Okay. So then we have pain. Does it hurt? Do you have GSM? Do you have some other vulvar disorder? That it is so painful that you cannot tolerate it. And no one wants to do something that hurts. You shouldn't. So we have to fix the pain and then see where we're at. And then finally, and it is what most women suffer from, there is a desire disorder where you feel connected, you love the person, the plumbing works, but you cannot get your brain to go there. And that is what I see the most of in my clinic. Okay. And there's a lot of things that feed into that. I jokingly, not all men, but men's libido tends to be the flight deck of a 740. No, men's tends to be a light switch, always on, right?
Okay.
Or very easy to turn on. Women's
Yeah.
very complicated. I either use a traffic circle or the flight deck of a 747 analogy.
Okay.
Right. So like the planets lining up and and everything. But there's medications to help with the desire part. Okay.
What is that? Testosterone?
Testosterone can be one. And it was studied in menopausal women, saw great results. The women were happy. They felt like it was working. No one's promising them 20-year-old libidos back. I mean,
Right.
what would I do with that? But they felt like, yeah, and the excitement was kind of back and all the things, and maybe even initiating every now and then. So
Right.
then there's other medications that are FDA approved. One is Addy in the United States, ADDYI, and the other is Vyleesi. Vyleesi, and they both work at like dopamine levels, increasing dopamine. Vyleesi is an injection you give yourself like 45 minutes before. I don't have a lot of takers on that one. Addy is a pill you take every day, just to kind of build your baseline levels.
More effective than testosterone or no?
They haven't been studied head to
Okay.
head. I suspect testosterone might be a little more effective.
Okay, gotcha. And then vaginal estrogen, which is not the same as like
No,
an
not at all.
estrogen patch. Okay, they're
Yeah.
two
So
different
we
things.
use vaginal estrogen to treat GSM, genital urinary syndrome of menopause. So it will restore the health, vitality, elasticity, mucus production of the tissues of the vulva and vagina. So for
Okay.
some women, sometimes with an arousal disorder, it will increase blood flow to the area. And that gets better. And for dry vaginas, tearing of skin, you can't imagine what women will tolerate to stay married.
God.
So, and they had no idea what was happening to them and they were scared to talk about it. And then we go in, we give them some vaginal estrogen. So vaginal estrogen is very local. It would take, I think, 100 days of vaginal estrogen to equal one birth control pill. Like, it's so low dose. It's so minimal. It's not systemically absorbed. It's just kind of like putting something on your skin.
Okay.
And Haley Casperson calls it skincare for down there. And
Yeah, because you can put it on the outside too.
someone with active breast cancer can use vaginal estrogen.
Really?
I think everyone should be on it after menopause.
Well, and my OB said you can also put it on your face if you want to. I was like, wow. I
Yes,
mean,
yes, you're
just
correct.
the things I have learned over the past like 2 years is actually amazing. Okay. So let's talk about the woman who is sitting in her doctor's office, and you said that you felt like you were this doctor once upon a time, who feels like she is saying all of her symptoms, and her doctor is kind of just saying, "You're aging. This is just what happens." Maybe diagnosing it as something else, and feeling like she's just not being heard. How long should a woman expect her doctor to sit and speak to her about like menopause care?
Well, you shouldn't expect to do it in your well woman exam because
Okay.
that is a very straightforward, like pre-planned exam for breast and uterine cancer screening and cervical.
Okay.
So like that is not a well woman exam. You need to schedule a problem visit to talk about menopause. We're still not doing very well in stats. Like I think the awareness is there, more practitioners are being aware, but I tell you, there's some of the Facebook groups of clinicians and they're not super happy about this movement and they're still kind of dismissive, and it's really upsetting to me But again,
Mm.
bless their hearts, they're getting their butts kicked at work. They're trying to see 30 patients a day because their boss is making them. They're under so much pressure to see more, go faster. And then all of a sudden you throw menopause, something they were never taught, never educated on, and you have an army of angry women coming to see you with Mary Claire's book and whatever. And I did this too. And so, they don't have the time to step out of the
Yeah.
box. American College of OB/GYN, the internists and family medicine, they are not mandating menopause education yet. And so it is a little bit of hit or miss. So I would call ahead. And if
And say, this is what you're coming in for.
are you educated? Did you receive training outside of your residency for this? No. Okay. Fair. Absolutely fair. They don't have the time to do it. They're busy doing their regular job. I did that job. Okay.
Okay.
So you need to go find someone who's menopause certified, find someone specializing in this, or try one of the online programs.
Okay. You have something on your website, don't you? On the
Uh-huh.
Pause Life? Isn't there something, yeah, for like
Yeah, so we
resources
have
and
a list of providers that our sweet, wonderful followers
Mhm.
wrote testimonials from all over the US and the
Okay.
world, really. We have Canada and some in Europe and
Okay.
Australia. And so you can go and look and see if there's anybody in your area on our list and read the testimonial, call, see if you can get an appointment. Um,
Okay.
and we have the Menopause Society link there as well for a certified provider from the Menopause Society. Again, there's only 2,000 of those. So, and half of us
Yeah.
are top. And so, we have a long way to go. But if you go to your well woman, we have a resource guide on our website, the menopause resource guide, and it has links to medical articles you can just drop off at your doctor's office.
They'll be like, "Thank you so much for coming by." But would you suggest they find someone new? Like, I feel like we don't want to
It's
offend
okay.
anybody.
Look, your wonderful, beautiful OBGYN probably wasn't taught and is so busy and
Mm,
beautiful care and surgeries and did everything, but this is a lack of knowledge. And I was that girl. And it's not fair to fuss at them or be mad. This is a systemic problem. This is not the fault of an individual clinician. Okay. And
if
so
you're
it is
sorry, go
okay
ahead.
to seek menopause care from someone else if your doctor can't get to it.
Okay. If
What is
you're
not okay is that they don't acknowledge that they don't know and you get dismissed again.
right.
That is not okay.
So the second part of that question is if they say, "Sure, let's get your blood work done." They do your blood work and they say everything has come back normal. And then you sit there because you don't know what that
They're
means.
undereducated. They are
Okay.
undereducated.
So is there a range or is there a normal?
Okay, remember, zone of chaos, spaghetti on the wall. There's
Right.
not really
Oh,
a test
yes.
done
Yeah.
in a single instant. The minute they draw that blood, where that estrogen and progesterone clearly is perimenopause. We're excellent at postmenopause.
Mm.
We know how to diagnose that. You know, every doctor knows how to diagnose postmenopause,
So
right?
that's easier to diagnose
I
than
don't
the
know what to do with it.
perimenopause.
So they
Okay.
don't know how
Yeah.
to treat it.
Okay.
But in perimenopause, we don't have a single great one-time blood test, and do not do a Dutch test. There's
What's a
no,
Dutch test?
oh, don't even, don't. Thank
You won't
you,
even
God,
you won't even speak of it. Okay.
I won't even
Just
speak.
if someone asks you,
Four
just
hundred
just
and
say
something
no.
dollars, and I've looked at 1,000 of them, and I'm like, I know more than most, and what the hell is this?
Okay.
It's gobbledygook.
Okay.
It's a way to sell
So,
supplements, really.
yeah.
It's a way for it's usually what's done by someone who's not licensed to prescribe medications, and you end up with a bucket of supplements based on your Dutch test.
Okay.
Just beware.
Um, the 3 HRT, and maybe there's more, I just don't know, but in my mind, I'm thinking estrogen, testosterone, progesterone?
Three main classes of hormones. We have our estrogens, our progestogens, and our androgens, like testosterone. Uh-huh.
Testosterone. Okay. So I am not on estrogen yet. I'm doing progesterone because you said progesterone or own?
Progestogens. So that
Okay.
would be our synthetic progestins, like in most birth control pills, and then progesterone.
Okay. She put me on that because I was having a hard time sleeping.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that's
So love
very,
that.
very reasonable in perimenopause, early perimenopause. So
Okay.
is for sleep disruptions to start with progesterone. We
Okay.
even have patients who we have on low dose birth control pills because their cycles were so heavy, right? It's control. They needed contraception. Their cycles are heavy, but they're not sleeping. Adding a little extra natural progesterone is very helpful for those patients.
Okay. For the woman who has to go on estrogen because her estrogen levels are low, are there big symptoms other than a blood test that are signaling You're low in
No, it's
estrogen?
very symptomatic in perimenopause. So
Okay.
sometimes we give estrogen to stabilize those crazy fluctuations. So
Mm,
basically, when we give estrogen in perimenopause, we're treating the brain. We're telling the brain to calm down, to stop these crazy
okay.
fluctuations. We're giving the brain just enough, not to suppress ovulation, but to tell the brain everything's okay and to feed those receptors in the brain so we don't go so long without it or have those crazy highs.
Okay. A big question that came in was I've been told because I have a family history of breast cancer that
Mhm.
I cannot take estrogen.
Wrong.
True, false, or false? Okay. It doesn't matter.
So unless a family history of breast cancer is not a contraindication to hormone therapy at all.
And that's because the WHI was inaccurate.
Right.
Okay. This is something that I don't know. If someone has had breast cancer, are they excluded from HRT going forward? They
That's a
are.
big, it's a very nuanced discussion. It depends on the
Okay.
grade, the stage, the years from treatment, what were you on? That is not something I can answer on a podcast, but
Okay.
it's easy.
Someone who has had a hysterectomy early, like 30, 35, 40.
So you mean just removing the uterus?
No, I mean like they got put into menopause.
So
Someone
she had
said that
surgical menopause.
okay, so surgical menopause. Is it possible? Do they ever then hit the age that we're kind of all typically at and kind
So
of
surgical
go
menopause,
through?
you don't get a grace period. There is no perimenopause. You are out
Oh,
immediately. And the younger you are when that happens, the more the risks of being menopausal are for you because you have a much longer time period. So women with untreated surgical menopause have much higher dementia, much higher osteoporosis, much higher mental health disorders, much higher weight gain, much higher all of it. And so
okay.
it's malpractice to not offer.
Okay.
And they don't
Okay.
need menopause hormone therapy dosages. They need dosages to give them back estrogen levels that they would have had in their premenopausal years.
Okay. Gotcha. Your favorite supplements that ever that like what are yours? I should say just say that. What are your supplements that you take like no you're not missing a day?
Vitamin D,
Vitamin D, like in a
vitamin D.
pill?
Yeah.
A pill,
And
okay.
so
Fiber.
and creatine now.
Creatine,
So
yeah.
10, women are only getting on average 10 grams of fiber in their diet. And I need 35 to 45 to decrease my risk of cardiovascular disease and to keep my cholesterol down. So most women are getting a third of what they
Okay.
need. So that is one. So I'm like, hey, track what you eat, download Chronometer, get a free nutrition tracker, just eat healthy for 2 weeks and see where your gaps are. That's what you need to supplement, right?
Okay.
So there's some people who are under the assumption of taking super high doses of certain things like vitamins will give you superpowers. No, I mean, so like if you have a vitamin C deficiency, you're more likely to have a viral illness, right? To not be able to fight off a virus. But taking extra vitamin C does not give you a superpower against a virus. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yep. So
So,
it is possible to manage your supplements through your diet,
oh yeah, my hope
but
for everyone is they never need a supplement. They get everything
okay.
food, but that's not reality.
Okay. Right. Yeah, exactly. It's not my reality. So back to the gym bros who like to say that you can, increase your testosterone or change your hormones through diet and exercise.
They're so funny.
Yes. Yes. No.
You
No.
can't. Okay, people with poorer diets have go through menopause a little bit earlier. Okay,
They
we know that.
do.
Yeah,
Okay.
any negative health, any poor lifestyle habits that don't lead to long term health will take out your ovaries a little bit sooner. But your ovaries are going to die. We don't have a human who has made it and lived long enough and not had menopause. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. They're just
Okay.
trying to sell you something. So there's some couple of studies looking at NAD and rats, and they delayed menopause a little bit. We're not there yet. Lots of studies happening in that space, but we don't have a supplement that's done it yet.
Okay. Alcohol.
Yeah. So it's poison
Okay.
to call it what it is.
Did
And
you always think that or not till you got to menopause?
oh, no,
No.
um, no, no. But
Why
what I
is it not
found
good for
with
us in
the majority
menopause?
of my patients is that we cannot tolerate alcohol like we used to. We're getting and probably to do with fat distribution and like GLP-1s is messing with us too because we're losing weight.
Oh.
And but more sleep disruptions, more heart rate variability, I'm on the scientific board at Aura, and that's kind of some of the stuff we're looking at in menopause is why is alcohol affecting our sleep so much more like
Mhm.
than it ever did before. I used to think in my 20s I'd just pass out after a night of partying with my
Yeah.
friends, sleep for 12 hours. I have
Now you won't sleep.
wine. I'm up at 3. Like, hello,
Right.
Chardonnay. Like it's, and most of my friends are the same. We just don't tolerate it like we used to. There's something
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Do you see a world where menopause is given the attention and financial support that it
I'm
deserves?
fighting every day. We're kind of in a weird bubble with politics and how
Mhm.
things are being funded right now. So I'm just going to focus on what I can do, and what I can do is educate. And what I can do is mandate. And there are some great laws being passed in different countries, red and blue,
Okay.
for menopause legislation. So if we can separate menopause from the bigger conversation around women's health and let reproductive rights, which need to be talked about, over
Be
here,
their own
let's
thing.
talk about women's health outside of reproduction over here. I think that needs to happen in order for us to be able to beat this gender health gap.
Okay. What would you say to the woman who is listening to this podcast and currently feeling so overwhelmed by what she's been feeling? She's made to been feel crazy by her doctor, by her husband. You posted a video. I tried to find it and I couldn't. It was a long time ago. And the lady was actually from Canada because I reposted it and she messaged me and she was crying in her car. And it was like she was taking like a selfie video. Maybe she'll see this. And she just was saying, like, I don't know what to do. I'm so overwhelmed. I feel like I'm losing my mind. What do you say to that woman who feels like she just doesn't like what does she do tomorrow?
So, quick is get on the phone with one of the healthcare providers in one of the telemedicine companies. That's the fastest thing to do. Or get on the menopause.org website and find a certified provider. Go find
Okay.
someone who knows what they're doing, right?
Okay.
Because we're doing a terrible job training our general clinicians on women's health after she's done having kids.
Okay.
And it's all interconnected, and she's not alone, and she's not crazy, and this is hormones, and there's help out there. You don't have to suffer.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we so appreciate you. And I was thinking about something when I was writing these notes. And I always say to my kids, talk about like using their gifts and, using what God gave you. And I said, at the end of your life, and I've heard someone say this before, whatever you believe in when you die. But, I said to my kids, like, when you finish this life and when you get to heaven, I want you to be able to say, to say to God, like, I did it. I used every single gift you gave me. I have nothing left in me. I used it all. And I was thinking of you. That phrase came to mind when I was thinking about you today because I think that you have just been such a gift to so many women and I think you're just making such a huge difference in women's lives and families and their families too because they have to live with them. So, I think I speak for thousands, maybe millions of us when I just say thank you so much for everything you're doing. Appreciate you.
I went to medical school to alleviate suffering,
Mm,
and
yeah.
that's what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're doing it. So we thank you. Appreciate you. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Mary Claire Haver. And we will put in the show notes everywhere. You can find you got a new book coming out. They can read currently the new menopause.
Within about
Okay.
a year, the new perimenopause.
In
I'm
about a
writing it
year.
right now.
Okay. And on your website, they can get all your resources and your Instagram at Dr. Mary Claire Haver. Is that
No,
right?
thepauselife.com.
Oh, no, sorry, the Instagram.
Oh, Dr. Mary Claire. Yeah.
Dr. Mary Claire. Okay, perfect. We'll put that all in the show notes. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you. Okay.
Okay. Take
Thanks.
care.
Bye.